What's up, folks? Anthony Armstrong here, former NFL receiver and host of Believe in Commanders. And with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. It's a league specifically created for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. Make your way over to prizepicks.com/believe and use the code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for a first deposit match up to $100. You must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details. Pick more or pick less. It's that easy. Prize Picks.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt, als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht.
Hello and welcome to Gegenpressing, the Bundesliga podcast from the Football Grad Network. I'm your host, Bryce Dunn, and joining me, as always, is Manu Veth. Manu, how have you been?
Yeah, I've been alright. Busy, came back really late last night from the Whitecaps game and then stayed up late to get these Champions League previews posted. But busy and good. How about you, Bryce? All good over there?
Yeah, all good. Busy, but I suppose different busy from what you're getting up to. But if I'm honest, I'd enjoy going to a few games myself. But it's fine. And I've obviously got wedding plans to be talking about for the next year.
I know what those
anyway,
are about.
Yeah. So it's a welcome change to go and talk to some people about football, I think. But we had a very exciting weekend. And normally at this point, I would say joining me as always is Chris Williams. But Chris is moving house at the moment, so he's suffering with no reception or no internet. We've all been there, haven't we? So Chris is actually sitting out this week, for the first time in God knows how many. But we've brought in a rather fantastic replacement, I must say, in Constantin Eckner. Welcome aboard, I suppose.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me.
Well, Constantin, we really appreciate you coming on. For anyone that doesn't know who you are, shame on them, but just explain a little bit your background and obviously interest in football.
Well, first and foremost, I'm basically a sports journalist based in the UK and Germany. I'm working mostly for German outlets and German television and a couple of newspapers. And I'm also the editor-in-chief of Spielverlagerung. Maybe that's a name someone has heard of, which is basically the tactics site, a blog dedicated to tactics, strategy, everything that the entire hipster sphere of football, basically. So we are covering that facet of the game.
That sounds fine to me. I have no qualms in going into a bit of hipster area, I think, or hipster sphere, as you said. So, as everyone can guess, we will be have a bit of an emphasis on tactics this week, but that's not a bad thing, in my opinion, anyway. But guys, let's jump in. We've got plenty to talk about. We've just had a really exciting weekend, haven't we? And we had planned this week to talk about maybe a lack of goal scoring in the league so far, but then, of course, this week we went and got loads of goals, didn't we? So it's trying to fight against us in a way. But, Manu, you kind of brought this to our attention, didn't you? That you were a little bit concerned that there hadn't been as many goals as normal. What is it that concerns you, or why do you think this is happening? And then, obviously, we're going to go to Constantin as well, so he can give an opinion. Yeah,
that's actually one of the big reasons why I brought Constantin on today. So before match day 8, we only had 2.44 goals a game, which is not a lot. The Bundesliga averaged 2.87 last season, 2.83 the season before that. It was all the way up to 3.16 in 2013-14, which was probably when the in my opinion, probably when we had the most quality in the league in recent years, which is probably also explains why there was more goals. But it really got me thinking. It's a little bit of a worrying trend, and maybe the interesting aspect of it too is that when you look at the actual statistic, there's still the same amount of chances almost created. There's 10.6 chances were created. But only 23.1% of those chances were put into the net. And, we've talked a lot about the likes of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, missing chances, but he still scored 31 goals last season. So that's another really interesting trend. We actually got lots of players scoring more than 20 goals, but yet overall scoring is down. And it got me thinking, and maybe Constantin, you're going to really correct me and say, no, you're wrong. But I think that maybe just the formation change is a big one. We used to have 4-2-3-1, as almost every club played with 4-2-3-1. Now a lot of teams are going to 3-5-2, which seems a bit more compact in defense. And I think there's also, we are in a little bit of a crossroads for the league. A lot of quality has left the league recently, and there's a lot of young players coming up, but the league isn't quite as good as it was 3 years ago, especially up in the goal scoring department. So a lot of clubs are liking to sit deep and be more cautious, and that's maybe another reason. But really curious to hear your opinion about this, Constantin.
So, yeah, I think you touched on two important points already. I think there are basically three major ones we can talk about. First off, I think the majority of clubs, of teams have made progress as far as the defensive performance goes. Going a few years back when Borussia Dortmund was, pretty successful under Jurgen Klopp. This entire thinking that pressing and especially high press and counter pressing is the key to be successful. It was that stuck in the mind of many coaches from then on. But the thing is that many needed time to develop and to figure out how to employ a successful high press, for instance, and how to do it more sophisticated than just man marking and moving the lines a little 10 or 20 yards down the field. So I think right now, especially with young coaches like Wolf, like Tedesco, Nagelsmann, who are basically who have been students of the game or have been basically students a few years ago, with them coming in, you have also some older coaches who have evolved pretty significantly, like I think Christian Streich, for instance. So you got plenty of coaches and teams who have developed concerning defensive performance, basically. Just being more than just or doing more than just playing a 4-4-2 and applying man marking schemes. You mentioned that the back fives. Or basically systems, including back fives, back threes. So going away from the 4-2-3-1 or even the 4-3-3. I think that's an interesting point to mention, because right now, a lot of teams with three defenders in the middle, but mostly two center midfielders ahead or in front of the defenders. So you got at least 5 or 6 players who defend the middle of the field. So wing play, high crosses aren't as promising as they were maybe a few years ago, because teams are more focused on defending the middle, on shutting down the passing lanes through the central, which was a few years ago in the 4-4-2 systems, 2 players on the wings on each wing. It was there was more focus on basically defending every zone and not, focusing on one specifically. So another thing regarding the, progress a lot of teams have made is, as I mentioned, they are not as what we call men orientated, not focusing solely on one-on-one situations, on man marking. So, but basically more, figuring out how to defend zones, which was a specialty of which is a specialty of Pep Guardiola, who coached Bayern Munich for 3 years in the Bundesliga. Also Tuchel, who's basically a student of Guardiola's. So you got, new coaches, and top coaches always influenced their peers who are, below them. You got more coaches who are now figuring out how to defend zones, going a little bit away from man marking, which is also an improvement. And another thing I've seen, especially this season, is that aggressiveness just, pays out more, than it probably has been before. I think, referees are more hesitant to, book players, at the moment. You got many matches where you see a lot of, tactical, not hard fouls, but tactical fouls in midfield around the halfway line, which is also a tactical tool. If you get away with it without getting in the booking, you can do that just to interrupt the passing flow of the opponent. You also mentioned, I think, lack of creativity. I think that's another point. Meaning that, while a lot of teams have, evolved defensively, they haven't, offensively. I just think that, many teams rely on, when they have the ball, they rely on, simple things, just the basics, but nothing else. And, when you play with a back three, when you play with a back five, you have to figure out how to, transform the system when you have the ball. Otherwise, there are plenty of teams who, just play with 5 or at least 4 or 5 players deep, then a center midfielder before the line, close to the line, which means you got a lot of players deep, a few players, high up the field, and there's nothing in between, which brings me to another point. Counter-pressing is one, because, playing long balls then isn't as successful because you don't have the right system to apply counter-pressing. And also, when we talk about systems, when we talk about there's basically a hole between, 6 or 5-6, players deep and a few players up front, is that, the Bundesliga right now sees a lack of, classic number 10s, traditional number 10s. There aren't any, only a few number 10s right now, or, we can even talk about, Kagawa, for instance, Didavi at Wolfsburg, Sabitzer kind of, Thiago kind of, Müller kind of, but, most teams, they don't even have one number 10. Examples are, Leverkusen, for instance, or Schalke, who have Max Meyer, but he, last weekend against Hertha, he played as a center midfielder, as a defensive midfielder, basically as the deep lying midfielder. So, plenty of teams don't even have one number 10, one connecting piece between, center midfield and center forward or the wingers, someone who can also make the difference in stalemates. So, and you also mentioned that the overall quality has dropped a little bit, which brings me to the last point, is that I think, apart from a lack of number 10s, which is, important and crucial, is also that there are less situations where you see someone, a winger, for instance, breaking through, just outplaying, outpacing an opponent. Of course, a famous example now is Pruma against Tolian. But it's Pruma, okay? It's RB Leipzig against Borussia Dortmund, 2 top teams. RB Leipzig, just a tremendous attacking department, and Pruma is just a tremendous player. Some said he has been uncoachable throughout his career, but he is talented as hell. So of course, Pruma is one, and there are a few others at Bayern, at Dortmund, at RB Leipzig, maybe at Hoffenheim. But when you go around these clubs, Hamburg, Hertha, and so on, my theory is that to beat someone in a basically a dead even 1-on-1 situation, you have to be at least 10% better than your opponent as far as agility, speed, vision goes. So, and right now I think, while defensive players have evolved, there are more great or at least talented, decent, capable defensive players. There are less outstanding, attacking players who can just outplay their, opponents, which also, leads to a little bit of a lack of, goal scoring opportunities at the end.
Another thing that's, as I listened to you, and this is something that came to mind, I think that the promotion of Stuttgart and Hannover also plays a role in this. Down went Darmstadt and Ingolstadt, and all of a sudden Stuttgart and Hannover come up, which basically means we don't have any clear-cut teams that could get relegated. Of course, everyone always points at Hamburg, but Hamburg is, a cat with 20 lives, they will never get relegated simply because they always get themselves out of there. But that means that you have lots of teams in this league right now who first and foremost go into a game thinking, oh, we can't lose, right? Because a lot of teams are already in that relegation mode, which is maybe a lot earlier than it usually is. And I think that also changes the entire philosophy of at least half the teams in the league saying, well, defense first, we can't concede. And especially this is, I think, another thing, and I think I concur with you. You have to be that 10% better than your opposition to score goals. So, a trend that I've noticed that when a team scores first, that team seems to then be able to shut down the opposition quite easily and get the result. So teams are almost afraid to go down early because they know that they can't get back into the game. So on the one hand, that's great because we have, it points towards a very even and competitive league. But on the other hand, it's also worrying that we don't have too many players in there right now that can make the difference.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, Hanover and Stuttgart are two big clubs. I mean, what we could call big clubs. So, I mean, if you go through or if you look at the 18 teams right now, there's basically only, I mean, Hoffenheim is an established one. It's from a small town. We know the story, but it's an established club. I mean, in my opinion, one of the top 4 clubs in Germany right now. So, I mean, there's only Augsburg, I guess, who's some kind of an underdog, but also sort of established. But I would still think Augsburg, I mean, if they get relegated, it's not like the end of the world. But for other clubs, it might be. I mean, right now, Cologne, Bremen, Hamburg, they are in the relegation zone or close to the relegation zone. Of course, Freiburg's maybe another one because Freiburg, I mean, if they get relegated, it's not, they're used to it. To be relegated and then go back up and then go back down. But other than that, you got at least 16 clubs who fight for at least they fight for everything basically because getting relegated is could hurt them significantly. I mean, it will cost a lot of jobs. Or get people fired. I mean, sometimes like Stuttgart, they managed to survive one season in the second Bundesliga without doing much of a structural change. But most of the time, I mean, that's not the case. I mean, just look at other so-called big clubs like Kaiserslautern and Karlsruhe, for instance. So I mean, you're absolutely right. And also, I think, and that's something that has happened in the, let's call it, educational system in Germany that's set up by the German FA. So how the German coaches are taught is that basically the pressing system and how all the facets of pressing, counter pressing, just defensive play. That's like the top priority right now, or it has been the top priority for a couple of years, which is something that was influenced by Klopp and others. Which leads to the fact that coaches like Nagelsmann, and I think a prime example is Tedesco, in my opinion, because Tedesco is coming up, really talented coach, I think 31 years old. So he comes up, had a few matches with Erzgebirge Aue, and he goes to Schalke. So promising coach. We know the story. It's like Schalke is very defensive minded right now, and although they got the weapons offensively. I mean, Conor Bianca and Howard, you name it. But when you look at what Tedesco does and what he focuses on, is that he wants to have his team, being stable defensively and knowing how to hurt the opponent on the break, how to set up transition attacks. That's how his main focus is. Hannes Wolf, another young coach at Stuttgart, he's basically a pupil of Jurgen Klopp. I mean, when he was at Dortmund, he tries to emulate a lot of things Klopp did or does still. Now at Liverpool, back then at Dortmund. So, like these young coaches are talented and they are well educated, but it's also that they are, their top priority is setting up a pressing system that works, just not conceding much goals and going from there, because they always think, or the thinking is, you can always hurt an opponent by, transition attacks, just attacking through counterattacks. So yeah, I guess, I mean, if all comes together, we have a Bundesliga that is more of a low-scoring league. I guess there was for a few years the French league, the Ligue 1, was actually the low-scoring league. I don't know the statistics, I don't know the numbers across Europe, but maybe that will change.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because it's only been 2 years since the foundation of the Bundesliga that the Bundesliga was not the top-scoring league in Europe, and this is like a completely different trend.
So Constantin, you would say it's more these young, talented managers coming through create a bit of a chess match amongst the teams tactically, rather than it being a lower standard of quality within the league, as in players.
I think it's a mix of several aspects. I mean, I don't want to blame the young coaches actually, because I think comparing Nagelsmann, Tedesco, Wolf with a few of their older peers, I think, I mean, they are more well educated, you know, and I think you could also blame some of the older folks, actually, some of the older coaches, just because they sometimes don't have the weapon, they don't have the ideas what to do, you know, what to do offensively, while, I mean, the young coaches, Nagelsmann, I mean, he's called like once in a generation talent by some of the sports journalists and by some of the Bayern Munich fans. I mean, you would think that he knows how to set up attacks, how to study plays and everything, but it's the main focus is defensive stability, and pressing and counter pressing, and I think that plays into it. But that's not the only reason that maybe the Bundesliga is turning into a low scoring league. But I don't know in the long term. I mean, we will see. And I don't think it's like a declining quality of players. I just think that defensive players, center backs, full backs. I mean, we always mourn about the full backs, and there aren't any quality full backs in Germany. I don't think so. I think there's plenty of at least decent fullbacks, and some are tremendous. Like Kimmich is for me, it's one of the upcoming right backs in the world. And he's already, up there, top 10 of right back, for instance, and others are as well. Rafael Guerrero, for instance, on the left side. So you got quality defenders, while, I mean, the attacking players are still, also have quality. But as I mentioned, I think if you are an attacking player and you have your one-on-one situation, nothing is setting up tactically. There are there's no outnumbering going on. So just one-on-one situation, you have to be at least 10-15% better than your opponent. Bruma was 10-15% faster than Tolian, so he just ran past him. But usually that's not possible. Usually you just can't run past a quality fullback like Tolian. Of course, Bruma is one of the outstanding ones, but our wingers, our attacking players at our teams, at like the mid-table teams, they don't have to. They aren't 10% better because the defensive player have evolved that much. Because there are so many, especially athletically, there are so many center and fullbacks who are not like. I mean, 10 years ago, there were fullbacks and center backs who just they moved like. Basically like camping trucks. And now they are, Boateng is not the only like outstanding center back athletically. There are Upamecano, Zagadou, guys like that, and they and more players are like that they are just, outstanding or incredibly fast. And acceleration is they don't have to fear a one-on-one situation against speedy center forward, for instance. They can just Upamecano is, in my opinion, a prime example. I mean, he's just sometimes a little bit sluggish, maybe, but if he is in a one-on-one situation against a center forward, I bet on him that he's faster than his opponent.
Well, let's just talk about this match day. And Manu, obviously, we talked last week about Jupp Heynckes coming into Bayern. And it kind of just covering for the rest of the season. You said that it was almost like a plaster, just over some of the cracks there. And this weekend, yes, they didn't come up against the toughest of opponents, being at home to take on Freiburg, but they won 5-0. But going back to their old ways of 4-2-3-1 with them, obviously 5-0 is very impressive. But is it less impressive because it's against Freiburg and it's not a true test, or what's your opinion?
Oh, not a true test is maybe not fair to Freiburg, but Freiburg have never won a game in Munich in the entire history, and it's just not a place where they do very well. And I didn't expect much. I think that there was still enough flaws in Bayern's game that I would say that we can't really take too much away from that game. Ryan Kent, for example, finding the space to go one-on-one against Ulreich. He doesn't then, of course, score, but, it shows you that there is still issues. I think one of the big issues is also Manuel Neuer being out long-term with an injury, and there's now reports and talks about him being out till actually all the way leading up to the World Cup, and that means, that they basically have to rely on Sven Ulreich, and Ulreich, he's afraid coming out of the 6-yard box, let alone the 18-yard box, and that means there's a very big gap between him and the defensive line. And Bayern have played now with Neuer since 2011, top of my head. And that means, that defense is used to a goalkeeper who basically plays like another defender. And that's going to be difficult against sides that, exploit that space, in the attacking third. And I could still see shades of that. It's just that Freiburg were not able to get into that space very much.
I mean, obviously, we're saying that, that's maybe not the toughest of tests them home against Freiburg, especially of Freiburg's record previously. But probably the first real test, would I be right in saying, is going to be when they take on RB Leipzig on the 28th. I mean, yes, they have Celtic in the meantime, but possibly these issues at Bayern, would I be right in saying that have come a little bit too late for Celtic to maybe hope to cause a bit of an upset?
I think, Celtic is, this sounds, I don't want to be too arrogant, but I think anything but a high victory against Celtic would really surprise me. Because I can't see Brendan Rodgers exploiting Bayern's weaknesses, but Leipzig could. And I mean, Constantin, you're a close watcher of Leipzig, and I mean, Leipzig, what they did to Dortmund, I can see them doing exactly the same thing to Bayern. And by that point, Leipzig will have gotten more used to that rhythm of playing in the Champions League and in the Bundesliga. There's something I think that really hurt them in the beginning of the season, but I'm now seeing signs at Leipzig that they're getting used to that rhythm. And the things that they've done against Dortmund, and Dortmund and Bayern have very different defensive problems. Dortmund's big offensive problem is that they haven't gotten quite used to the style, and Bayern's big problem is that they haven't really gotten used to playing without Neuer. And I think that leads to similar issues on the field that that Leipzig can explore. And, I can just see that high press, fast wingers like Bruma really, really hurting Bayern right now. It's similar to what Hoffenheim did to them.
Yeah, I basically agree because right now the sample size is pretty small. Yeah. It's just the Freiburg match, and watching the Freiburg match, there were a few situations, at least in the first half, specifically two where in which Bayern just made mistakes in the build-up and almost paid for it. One was Ryan Kent in the 6th minute, and then later around the 30th minute, I think, when Müller had a bad first touch, and it was Freiburg, so they didn't capitalize on it. But there are other teams who would put more pressure. I mean, Bayern sometimes struggled just because Freiburg went towards them with some kind of intensity, but it wasn't like any kind of sophisticated pressing system. When we look at Red Bull, RB Leipzig. They have figured out how to do that. They did it against Dortmund, and they will try to do it against Bayern. And I mean, sure, Celtic and Hamburg, the next two matches, I think good sparring partners, just like Freiburg. I don't think they will do much against Bayern just because they're just outmatched. And individually they are just they can't keep up with Bayern. But then the doubleheader against RB Leipzig, just at Leipzig, and then home game against Leipzig 3 days later. I see them at least. I mean, I guess losing one. Sure, it's a cup match at Leipzig. I don't know. I mean, or who knows? But at least touring and then extra time. Who knows how that will go? But I see Leipzig, doing something against them and doing some damage. Because I mean, Heinkes needs more time than, let's say, 14 days to change or to solve some of the problems, the issues. And I mean, that's just my opinion on Bayern Munich in general. Is that just don't expect them to be, the force they were in 2013.
Yeah,
for several reasons. Just, I don't think the team is as good as they were back then. I mean, Ribéry is just, they are both, Robben and Ribéry, they're both near the end of their careers. So there aren't any quality replacements. Kingsley Coman is a talented player, but I don't think he's there like where Ribéry was a few years ago. And our players, they need time. Tolisso and James is not a factor right now. The quality isn't there. And also, which is interesting, in 2013, Bayern was just a force, athletically, technically, just, they could outplay teams just because they were that good. It wasn't even Heinkes didn't do much. I mean, he applied a good pressing system, but it wasn't like he was like this mastermind behind the success. It was also in some close matches against good teams, just Bayern relied on them being, just better, outplaying their opponents. Right now, I don't think that's possible against the best teams of the Bundesliga. And, don't even talk about the best teams in Europe, because we watched the PSG match and we watched the Real Madrid matches last year. That's how it is. There are several teams in Europe that are just better right now, have a better squad than Bayern Munich. So they have to find out how to beat them tactically. And, if Heinkes is the right coach to do that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think he's someone who can get them back on track, maybe winning the championship, because Dortmund is not as let's say, not as great as some fans might think. Just pointing at the 3 matches they had against top teams. So I guess he can win the championship, but it will be maybe closer than in 2014, of course. I mean, because back then just Bayern dominated the league.
Yeah, I think but we're going to have a championship race, and this is really one of the next topics, isn't it? Because I think that Dortmund, they struggle against the big sides, and I can't really see them anytime soon stabilizing that, because Peter Bosch's system needs time, and it's putting in together all these pieces and make it defensively work is very hard, especially in a league that's now changing emphasis towards defense, right? So I think Peter Bosch needs a lot of time, but how many teams in the Bundesliga are going to maybe hurt Dortmund? 2, right? Leipzig and Bayern. And then they're going to win all, and maybe Hoffenheim. Yeah, that's actually one to really look out for. But those teams will also take points from each other. I'm pretty sure that Leipzig will take points from Bayern, and Hoffenheim will take points from Bayern again too. Dortmund, I think, could also really hurt Bayern. I think that's the way Dortmund are playing is actually poison for Bayern's system right now, because the Bayern are lacking speed, and they're lacking speed not just up front but also in the back. And one of the reasons for that is, I think, putting Javi Martinez in midfield there made a lot of sense, but he's not, one of those pivotal players that you see in midfield these days in the Bundesliga. I mean, Stuttgart, for example, signed Ascasibar because he is both athletic and physical. Zakaria at Borussia Mönchengladbach is another one, right? Who you identified at the Yellow Wall podcast, Constantin. These are all midfielders who are not only physically strong, but also really fast. And Bayern don't have anyone like that. And I think that that's going to hurt them against teams that are just going to play in a quick transition game, really quick counter-attack. So these teams are all going to take points off each other, which means that it could be like a 3 or 4 team race all the way up to the end of the season.
So Manu, you reckon that it's going to come down to basically the head-to-heads amongst these top 4 sides or so, and whoever comes out of those better, because you can see those sides picking up points against all the other teams.
I think what it really comes down to is not losing against the small teams, and that's something that Dortmund done really poorly in the last few years. And I don't think that's going to happen to them this year. I think that they're going to consistently get their points against all the smaller sides. And I mean, we've seen that up to this run, all the way to Leipzig. They were almost perfect. And that is how you win the league when there's several teams going for it. You have to pick up your points against the Hamburgs, the Freiburgs, the smaller sides of the league. And I can see Bayern and Leipzig drop points there. And then Leipzig have done it already. They've already dropped points against some of the smaller sides. So, I think that is really what it will come down to, which is interesting because we really haven't had that in a while. But yeah, I think that's really that will be the key to success. If you want to win the championship this year, you have to beat all the small teams consistently week in and week out.
Well, 2 of the big teams that did face each other this weekend, it was the one that we coined, and everyone else I'm sure did, as the game of the weekend, was Dortmund taking on RB Leipzig. Constantin, what did you make of this game? Obviously, Leipzig getting the win the first time in, how many games was it against Dortmund? Was it 48 at home? Something like this?
Like that, yeah.
Yeah, it was rather large and rather impressive. I think 41. The last time was when? 41. It was back when Jurgen Klopp was in charge, as far as I'm aware. What did you make of the game?
Well, I think it was expected that Leipzig is one of the few opponents in the Bundesliga right now who could beat Dortmund. As Manu mentioned already, is that Bosch system is working quite well against all the mid-table teams. And I think the Gladbach match showed where the cutoff actually is, because I think there are only 4 top teams right now in the Bundesliga. Gladbach, Schalke, they can become top teams. They can turn into top teams, especially Gladbach right now for their new possession game. But other than that, there are only a few teams, I think Bayern, RB Leipzig and Hoffenheim, who can actually beat Dortmund at this point. And Leipzig just, of course, a little bit luck on their side. And I mean, how the match went, it was on their side. But overall, it was also that Bosch tried to adjust his tactical approach, because he knew how dangerous RB Leipzig is, especially in midfield, how dangerous their pressing system is, and how dangerous they are when they win the ball in midfield, which is their main goal. Always, it's not winning the ball, high up the pitch, it's winning the ball in center midfield, by Keita, by Demme, by Leimer, or whoever is playing in the center midfield, Campbell, for instance. And then starting transition attacks. So he knew that, and he let his defenders, his back 4, playing a little bit deeper than usual. But it was still not enough, because he has to make more adjustments, especially in terms of counter pressing, because in this match as well, when Dortmund lost the ball up front, or up down the field somewhere, both both attacking midfielders. I mean, Schein was the deep lying midfielder. The both players in front of him, the midfielders, they just moved towards the ball, which is something they do in other matches against the lower quality competition, which is good, because then they put pressure on the opponent immediately after the turnover, which works out quite well against most of the teams. But even against like Hertha and other clubs, the opponents had a few chances to counter, which they didn't really do at the end, or they didn't use the counter attacks. They got the opportunities. RB Leipzig, I mean, they are briefing counter, they are briefing transition attacks. That's basically bread and butter, is pressing and transition. I mean, that they could hurt them, I was expected. And then on top of that, you got someone like Puma, who's just outpacing Toran in one situation, which was a tremendous goal. I like that stuff like that, was simple. And sometimes it's, just simple things. If it works out, why not? Just do it. That a few defenders or that several fullbacks at Dortmund are injured. I mean, it doesn't work in their favor, of course. But on the other hand, even like I think back four featuring Piszczek and Schmelzer wouldn't have done that much better against RB Leipzig in that particular match, because it's more a tactical issue than an issue of personal. So and also considering that RB Leipzig, I mean, they were playing without Werner and Forsberg, so they got a few players on the bench as well, quality ones. I mean, Werner is basically the best German striker right now, and one of the best strikers of center forwards in the Bundesliga, if not across Europe. So, I mean, he was on the bench and they still were dangerous as hell. Overall, I think, I mean, it could have been a draw at the end. Of course, it wasn't like Dortmund was, just outplayed, throughout the 90 minutes. After the second red card against, the second red card, who was sent off? Ilsanker. When Ilsanker was sent off, I mean, you saw one, pretty interesting aspect, just in football in general. If it's a match 10 against 10, 9 against 9, maybe, if just, less players on the field and it's equal numbers, it's just that the team that has the ball, is usually has the advantage, because, it's far more difficult to play, effective pressing when you have only 10 players. 10 players to or nine outfield players to shut down all the passing lanes. It's pretty difficult, almost impossible. While having possession with 10 players with 9 outfield players is it's easier. Just to put it simple.
Constantin, do you think Werner of Forsberg weren't even brought on because of the game against Porto during the week, the Champions League game, and how do you think this game is going to go? I mean, they more or less have to win this one, don't they?
Yeah, they have to win that one. I think Werner wasn't just really ready to go for at least not ready to start. I think he's still more or less. I mean, is he injured? I don't know. His injury was pretty complex. So, but I think they brought him to Dortmund, just as his. I don't know, just as the second gun, sticking in your socket, just to have one, just to threaten a little, just to show her. And here's Werner. If he's out there in the field, he will probably hurt you, because Dortmund can be hurt with their high back line. I think it would be a day in the office for Werner, at least once in a few situations. I mean, August Tong did well, but I thought in a few situations, I mean, it would have been the perfect opportunity for Werner to just break through, or to make a one behind the line and then get the ball. But I mean, August Tong did well, so there's just nothing. I mean, there's no point in criticizing him for not being Werner. That's not something you can be at this point, at least. So yeah, I think he will be out there against Porto. He will play against Porto, and as you mentioned, they have to win. I think they will win. I think next week or this week will be the first week for the German clubs. Not across the board, but for most of the German clubs to revitalize themselves, basically in the Europa League and the Champions League. And Dortmund and RB Leipzig have to win, and I guess they will win. And maybe we will see a few wins in the Europa League as well, because I mean the German teams, they pretty much have embarrassed themselves so far. So they have to do something. They have to show something. The Bundesliga, was so proud of being the number 2 in Europe for a few years. Now they have to show that they are at least as good as the Premier League.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Manu, would you agree that it's going to go positively for the German sides? I mean, obviously, Constantin said he reckons Leipzig will beat Porto. You said that probably you'll see that, Bayern would expect to beat Celtic by quite a few. Do you see Dortmund beating Apoel by quite a few as well?
I said 5-0. I'll stick
then
to
that's a yes.
I stick to that. Yeah, no, look, I think that the results in Europe have been embarrassing. And I don't actually mean the Champions League teams, because that can happen. I think when you look at the teams that the individual clubs were facing, and when you take it in individually, and we've spoken about that, right? If Bayern played against PSG, and they were coached by a coach who have now just learned actually was on the way out already before the game even kicked off in Paris. Ancelotti apparently was already working towards getting an exit at Bayern, and so he did the utmost to get that. So, you have that as kind of as a background. On top of that, it's PSG. PSG have just spent, what was it, 400 million euros this summer on 2 players alone. It'd be embarrassing for them to not get results against any side, right? And PSG are under a lot of pressure because of the news that are emerging. They need to basically win this year, because they may not be in the Champions League next year. So there was that. Dortmund were facing Real Madrid. Well, they're the defending Champions League winner, won it twice in a row, could win it against this year. I think that's a result that's not hugely surprising either. And Leipzig, I think Leipzig is still coming to terms with what's going on, and playing week in, week out, playing in the Bundesliga, playing in the Champions League. It's a very young side. I think the average age was 23.8. And that's something that they have to still learn. It's a learning process. So I think you can it's not great. I'm not saying that there's something that should happen again, but it can happen. And I think I mentioned this last week. The Europa League, the results were that really, got me thinking. And I think that some of these games, even individually, and even when you look at Köln with their problems, even when you look at Hoffenheim the first season back, and Hertha just being Hertha, I think they still need to win those 3 games. Period. They're not playing against world-class teams. They played against Ludogorets, Östersunds, and Red Star. I'm sorry, but if you're a Bundesliga team, you need to win. No matter which Bundesliga team you are, you have to win individually those 3 games. And when you look at the opposition this week, I think that we will see 3 wins, and I think it's very much expected, and anything but that in the Europa League would be a huge disappointment. And I mean, you look at where the 3 clubs are on an individual basis. It's quite obvious that the teams need to have wins, otherwise it could be early goodbye for the 3 Europa League teams.
Yeah, most certainly. I strongly agree that I think the Champions League sides will get on much better this week. But also the Europa League teams. I mean, Cologne, we've spoke about them plenty, and about how things have just not been the same there. Obviously, Modeste has left, but they just haven't been themselves. They were obviously sprung with a bit of bad fortune in losing 2-1 to Stuttgart on Friday night with that last-minute goal. But Constantin, there's been many problems at Cologne, but do you see this midweek game against Bad Borisov being a bit of a final for Peter Stoger? I mean, surely the pressure has to be mounting there. I mean, even if it's directly his fault or not, someone's got to take responsibility for how poor they have been.
I don't think the bottom match is actually the deciding match whether Stöger has to go or not. I think it's great for Cologne, for fans to be back in Europe, but overall I don't think they care actually, because the Europa League is just not that attractive. And I mean, if they go out, it's not the end of the world. If they, go into the winter break with 5 points, that's pretty much the end of the world. So I think the deciding match, or the final match, so to say, is Cologne against Werder. Not only for Stöger, but also for Nuri, for both coaches, because they both have. I mean, it always depends on the performance, but basically Stöger, I think he has to win, and Bremen, they at least have to perform well and get 1 point at Cologne. I mean, losing at Cologne could be the end for Nuri, and losing against Werder could be the end for Stöger. I don't think the bottom match is that important. I think the match, next week, I think it's a Saturday. I think that's the important one, because it's just in Germany, what's it called? Not against Elend, basically, bad against worse. So yeah, it won't be pretty, but it will be exciting.
The gutter match. I agree. I think that's going to be the key match. But I think that the match against Bate Borisov is important for the atmosphere at the club. If you go to Belarus and Bate Borisov are a good side. A few years ago they beat Bayern, and I just finished a preview on them. They are a very, very well-run club. Considering how little money they have. They have put together very, very good infrastructure in one of the poorest countries in Europe, Europe's last dictatorship, just to throw that out there. And yet they have been, but what they have been relatively successful. So I think that's going to be a match that can set the tone for the Werder Bremen match. And I think that is something to keep in mind for that one. But I agree 100%, Constantin, if, Köln need to win against Werder. And I think, personally for me, Werder Bremen are tactically the worst team in the league, because I think Nuri is not a Bundesliga coach. I've meant that from the very beginning. I don't see very much when I see Werder Bremen. Last year they relied very much on individuality rather than tactical finesse, and this year it's showing that that's all they have. And for Peter Stöger, I personally think Peter Stöger is a very good coach. If you survive in Köln for 4.5 years now, you have to be an excellent coach. And I'd be massively surprised if Köln don't win that game.
It's just interesting how things sometimes go, because a few months back when Tuchel resigned or whatever happened there at Dortmund, but when the discussion started, who could be the next Dortmund coach? I mean, some fans, basically including myself, I saw Stöger as a realistic option. Not as the favorite one, not as the best one, but as a realistic option, because I thought maybe Watzke and Sorte could buy into the idea that Stöger, hardworking guy, is like a blue collar guy, for Dortmund. I know that Watzke loves these kind of stories, that just he could be maybe the next Dortmund coach. I mean, they went with someone else. They basically went with two coaches. We have the same agent, but that's another story for another day. That's just, that Stöger was one of the, maybe was one of the candidates. And now, moving forward a few months, from, I don't know, back in April, March, May to October, and he's, on the verge of being fired. So sometimes these things work that way, but I think Stöger won't be without a job for long. I think if he gets fired, he will get he's one of the hot candidates, or on the short list, if somewhere else, front office looks for a new coach in the Bundesliga, because he's that good. I mean, sometimes things have to end, and the Cologne team, with losing Modest, not replacing him, or not replacing equally, at least. I mean, Cordoba is good, but not Modest level good. It's and a few other problems they have. It's just sometimes these teams drop down. I think they overperformed a little bit last season. Now they underperform a little bit, and at the end, you're just bottom. Sometimes.
Yeah, I think the big problem for Köln was that they didn't buy a Modest replacement. I think Cordoba.
It's tough to buy one.
Yeah,
I mean,
is.
You're Cologne. Who do you go for? I mean, who's the guy you can buy? Yeah, even if you have the money, that's the problem, I guess.
Sometimes you just don't sell. That's maybe the big mistake that they made. They didn't need to sell Modeste. They have the money. When you look at the financial reports that are coming out of Cologne, money wasn't an issue. They could have bought Cordoba and kept Modeste, and I think that would have actually been a good pairing, because Cordoba is a ball player. He's not an all-and-out scorer. I actually like Cordoba quite a bit, but he's not a Modeste type of forward. They're two different kind of players. You can't compare them at all. And I think the one would have worked well with the other, but basically saying, okay, well, we're buying this guy from Mainz, who was important for Mainz because he could hold the ball and make room for other guys. And say now you have to score 25 goals, because that's basically, it didn't say that. They tried to not to say that, but basically that's, what they did. And, that I think was a big mistake.
Right, and also holding the ball is nice and everything, but in the first two matches you got Jojic as number 10. I mean, Jojic is not the kind of supporting striker, who makes the runs, who then picks up the ball, after Cordoba holds it for a little bit, and Osako wasn't fit when the season started, and I mean we are still early in the season. So I mean, if you have a wall player like Cordoba, you need the other one, you need the. I know it's a little bit overblown, but you need the Thomas Müller.
Yeah,
you need the Thomas Müller to the Mario Mandzukic, and I mean the problem is that there is no. I mean, right now Osako maybe could be it, but I mean the problems are more than just Cordoba. There are other problems as well, and I think as offensively they didn't do that well last season, but they had Modeste who just. Like Klou was on his shoes. If there were a few long balls, he just picked them up and he just, he kept the ball. Right now, that's not how it works. And if they just bump down the rings, it's also something, we mentioned earlier in this episode that, there are so many teams now defending with 3 central defenders and just the center is crowded. So just, playing high cross after high cross after high cross, it's not working out against most of the teams because they have the advantage in the air. You got, there were a few Cologne matches where Cordoba was out there on his own, alone against 3 defenders, against 3 monsters. I mean, even he, as imposing as he might look, don't stand a chance against 3 other defenders.
Yeah, the Stuttgart game the Stuttgart game is a good example for that, because there were 3 defenders, big defenders on the field, and then in midfield you have a small guy in Askasiba who destroys, and then you had Mangala, who's basically another centre back, and boom. Yeah. Sorry.
Would they have been best maybe splashing the cash on, I know he's a bit aging, bit like Pizarro, but someone like Mario Gomez?
I don't know if Gomez is ready to go to Cologne.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
But I mean, that kind of player, maybe they would have been able to.
I would have brought back Podolski. Bring back Podolski.
One last run, right?
One last run. What could possibly go wrong? Bring back Lucas.
Well, they're giving Pizarro one last run. But guys, we're running out of time a little bit, and I want to speak very quickly about Hoffenheim and Hertha, who both really need a win in Europe this midweek. Manu, how do you see the 2 games going? Do you see both sides getting 3 points and staying in the competition for a little bit longer?
Hoffenheim are playing against the Turkish side, whose name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. And yes, they need the 3 points there. But that's, I think, Başakşehir. I'm sorry, Turkish listeners. I probably completely butchered that.
I've lived in Istanbul for a while, and I think that was basically right.
Oh, yes. I can speak Turkish. Anyways, that's ready for another day. They need to get the 3 points there, and I think anything else. I know Turkey is a hard place to play, so but I think they'll need to get the 3 points. And Hertha,
they're playing at home, right?
Oh, they're playing at Hoffenheim at home.
Yeah, Hoffenheim at home against Başakşehir and. Yeah.
3 points.
Hertha is playing at Soya.
In Lvov. And at Luhansk, you can't play football in Luhansk because of the war in Ukraine. We got all the background on that on footballgrad.com, so I don't want to go into, because we'll be here for another 2 hours if I talk about the conflict in Ukraine. But Soria is one of the 3 teams in Ukrainian football in exile right now, and they're playing in Lvov at the European Championship arena. But again, that is a game that Hertha need to win.
Yeah, very much so. Well, guys, we've more or less come to the end of the podcast. So we've spoke plenty, haven't we? Constantin, I want to ask you one question just before you go, because we've obviously spoke plenty about all the teams at the top and who may get the better of who. But I was thinking in the back of my head, who's going to win the league? Who do you think is going to win the league?
Oh, I'm sticking to what I said, prior to the season. I think Bayern Munich will win the league at the end. I think they're just a little bit the notch better than Borussia Dortmund and RB Leipzig.
Wow, interesting times. But guys, let's do a little bit of a shout out. Constantin, it's been fantastic having you on. I could have stayed here for another hour, but I think our editors would kill us. What would you like to draw people's attention of? Maybe you've got something, an article coming out, or anything else that you'd like people to check out.
I mean, they absolutely should check out my Twitter, of course. CC_ECKNER is my Twitter handle there. So CC_Eckner. And also, I mean, I just encourage all the people, all the listeners to check out Spielverlagerung. It's Spielverlagerung.com for, the English speaking world. We also have a German edition, which is basically our main page, is Spielverlagerung.de. So we've got plenty of articles up there, analytical match analysis, analytical pieces on the Bundesliga, first and foremost, but on other leagues as well. And our English edition, we analyze, Premier League, La Liga. I think I will write an article on Jupp Heynckes' first few matches, maybe this week, maybe after the end of the week. And also in Barcelona, something's planned. And yeah, they should check out that. And everything else they can just find on my Twitter, because I post the hyperlinks and everything. Just as everyone else does these days.
Yeah, of course. Manu, what have you got going on? You've always got plenty, but what would you like to draw people's eyes to?
Yeah, so Champions League previews are posted. We did 8 games this week. So they are up on Footballgrad and Fußballstadt.com. You can of course find them just on our Twitter at Footballgrad Live, like Constantin. We just put the hyperlink on that, so you don't need to go to the individual sites. It's all there. And then of course the Europa League previews, they're all coming tomorrow. I don't have the number on top of my head, but it's basically all the Bundesliga teams, and all the post-Soviet-based teams. And we have some, I guess, Footballgrad derbies, the Bate and the Soria game, which would usually go up on one or the other pages. I haven't really quite decided yet how I'm going to solve this issue, but they will be up and you will be able to find them on Twitter. And then you can, of course, follow me at Manuel Veth.
Of course, always plenty going on. I've been your host, Bryce Dunn. You can find me on Twitter at Bryce Dunn11. I suppose the only thing I can draw your attention to, apart from obviously the Footballgrad universe, is the Golazo podcast, the Mexican football one, which will be out just in a few days. So check that out. We've got midweek games and everything. Guys, if you've enjoyed the podcast, please head over to the likes of iTunes, give us a rating, hopefully a positive one, or maybe some positive feedback. Apart from that, we really appreciate you tuning in. Enjoy the midweek European games, and we'll be back very shortly with an update on next week's match day. Well, that's all there is to say. Auf Wiedersehen.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen, ich hab zu hoch.
One gift that never gets returned? Trick question. It's 3 gifts: beer, wine, and spirits. And with Drizzly, you can send the gift of drinks right to your loved one's doors. Drizzly lets you compare prices from local liquor stores on a huge selection of beer, wine, and holiday spirits, then get them delivered right to that lucky someone's door in under 60 minutes. And right now, Drizzly is giving customers $5 off their first order. Just enter promo code JINGLE at checkout. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com.
It wouldn't be the holiday season if there wasn't candy, right? Celebrate the holiday season with the Holiday Crush. They've sprinkled candy with a holiday theme and fun-packed challenges every week for 5 whole weeks, finishing on January 4th. The more challenges you complete, the better your chances of unwrapping delicious rewards. So, are you ready to crush the holidays? Play the Holiday Crush now. Download it from the App Store, Google Play, or Windows Store for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Let's be real, dealing with tangled cords can make it harder to do your hair. Break free with the new Unbound Cordless Auto Curler from Conair. Get the curls and waves you want, anytime, anywhere. It's designed to let you experience the power and freedom of beauty in motion. No cords to hold you back. You get your curls and waves your way. Unplug and be unbound. Loose curls, tight curls, beachy waves. The Unbound Cordless Auto Curler makes it easy to get the looks you love. Love your look. Live unbound. Available at Conair.com and search Unbound.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.